All right, so yesterday we talked about, like I said, price ceilings, price controls, and then we started on price floors. And remember that when we talked about price floors, we were more specifically talking about the airline industry in the 70s. We talked about why price floors were set above equilibrium price. The actual definition, which is the reason why they're set above, even though a floor you'd think was below, is based on the definition, not where it is in the graph. Remember that. So it's based on the fact that the price floor is the lowest legal price you can charge for a good or service. Right? So in our airline industry, okay, one of those airlines had, or one of those routes had a price floor in it. Okay, do you remember which one? The interstate one, okay? You may not remember the price, it's asking a little bit too much. There, okay, $169. Then there was one that was intrastate, right? Los Angeles to San Francisco, which was $69. And then if you remember, the whole reason why the interstate one was more expensive was because it was between two states. It had nothing to do with the popularity, with the number of flights, size of the airport, whatever. It only simply dealt with the fact that it was between states as opposed to flying within a state. And we talked about that the Congress has the right under the Constitution to regulate interstate commerce, so they regulated this. So the market equilibrium price would be the $69. If we're taking out all other factors, except for the fact that one had a price floor and one didn't. So you can't say, well, it was more popular or the distance was changed. No, none of that is true. So same distance, same everything was just statewide. You would know that the equilibrium price would be $69 simply because based on distance, popularity, and all that stuff, $69 is what people would pay. However, because there is a legal and binding price floor, in other words, an effective price floor set at $169, that's what the price floor was set at. This is where we ended yesterday, and we talked about whenever there is a price floor, there is more quantity supplied, in this case seats, than there are quantity demanded, in this case commuters or people who wanted to take flights. All right, and you've got a situation where there's a surplus created. And again, I put you in a situation, and we'll think about that again, but in a situation where you've been on a flight, you've probably been in a situation where the flight was absolutely jam-packed. I've only been on a few flights where every single seat wasn't taken. Okay, in both instances, there were a flight from here to Austin, Texas, and thankfully for both the Southwest crew and whatever poor soul would be the additional person, that flight wasn't or had at least one extra seat, because we took my 2-year-old you don't have to pay anything for kids that are less than 2, and he's a lap child, and my 2-year-old is anything but a sit-still lap child, and so it was a good thing that we had a seat that he could get up on, climb down, walk around, and all that kind of stuff, and eat and all that. We even tried drugging him with NyQuil and stuff. Nope, just bounce right off him. That's like his superpower is, I will not succumb to sleep medicine. And so it would have been miserable. But that's the only 2 instances where I've ever been on a flight that didn't have the seats sold out. But if it would have been in the 70s, we would have been reassured not only with our awesome poofy hair and sweet bell bottoms, we would have been assured that there would have been seats left over on the plane. All right. We also talked about, so we talked about that $169. We also, this is where we, the very last thing, and I don't know if you guys remember, but if they can't compete on price, then what do airlines have to compete on? Quality or service. Good. Both, all right, both are interchangeable. So service. So back in the 70s, they did just that. We'll talk about it. So again, if you've been on a plane recently, you know that it's hard to squeeze in to those seats. And some of you guys are bigger and taller than I am. And so I even have a hard time squeezing into a seat. I can't imagine somebody like Hovis trying to squeeze into a seat. That'd be him driving a little clown car or something like that. Or imagine the Grinch, if you've seen the one with Jim Carrey, him sitting in that little buggy driving. it would be extremely hard. And the newer airlines that are coming out, the seats are even flatter, less cushion, and even less space. The idea is to jam-pack as many cattle people as possible into this gigantic cylinder. All right, but back in the 70s, the seats were like big and cushy and fluffy and comfortable. All right, something that you probably haven't experienced unless those of you fly in first class, in which case then I hate you. All right, so I'm just kidding, but it'd be nice to be able to do that once. All right, so in the 70s, again, the seats, you had room on the seats are comfortable, they would recline most of the way down, so that was nice. How many of you have been on a domestic like flight and been served food that you didn't have to pay for? I'm not talking about peanuts and pretzels. What airline was it?
British Airways.
Okay, but that was that like in between like Chicago and Denver, or was that international?
That was international.
It was international. So I'm not talking international, I'm talking domestic. Yeah.
It was United.
Where were you flying in between?
It was like in Florida.
Wow, so even then, like, I haven't flown Florida to Denver, I've flown DC to Denver, and I still haven't gotten food that you didn't have to pay for. So but it's rare, right? One person out of like both of my classes, one person has said they've been served food. Now on international flights, that's different. And when I took students to China, we had a flight, a very short flight. It was like a 2-hour flight. And it was from it was from Chengdu to Hong Kong. So it was a really short flight, 2 hours. And it was like the world's quickest meal. The second that the airline left the ground, the stewardesses were already in the aisle handing out food. Like, it was really quick, and it was a full meal. And they were already handing out food, and we ate, and then like the plane would then like leveled off, got to its cruising altitude for like 20 minutes, and then they collected everything real quick, and then we were on our descent. Like, it was the world's quickest meal. But they served that because there were still price floors in China, and so all the flights still had meals on them. So we flew in between Xi'an and Chengdu, we also got fed. And that was a little bit longer of a flight. But regardless, those are still within the country.
Was the food good?
Yeah, it was all right. And a lot of you have flown internationally. And so you know you get food on there. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but still you get served food, which is something we don't typically get here because airline companies don't have to compete on that kind of service. They used to. You used to get full meals on flights. All right, then again, if the airline tickets are so expensive, who are going to be the people who are flying on airlines? Families or?
Business people.
Yeah, business people. And specifically, we're talking about the 70s. Some of you watch Mad Men. You know it's businessmen on those flights. And so they would have situations and calls for stewardesses. So they would attract the prettiest stewardesses. Has anybody flown on Lufthansa?
Oh my God, yes.
One of the distinctive characteristics of Lufthansa is the attractiveness of their flight crew.
Like a test and everything.
So yeah, they certain height, certain weight, certain age. They have very, very specific things. The reason being is because in Germany they still have price floors and they still compete on them.
Yeah, like after a certain age you can't be a stewardess anymore.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I used to be, so hold on, it used to be the case back in the day, that used to be the case. So how many of you have seen the movie Catch Me If You Can? It's Leonardo DiCaprio. So some of you have. It's a great econ movie. It has the Federal Reserve, it has checks and how that system all works, but it also deals with this idea of price floors. Because in that, again, if you haven't seen the movie, it's Leonardo DiCaprio. It's based on a true story. A kid about your guys' age runs away from home because his parents are getting divorced. And so he runs away from home. By the time he's 19, he's successfully passed the bar and posed as a lawyer and practiced law. He successfully posed as a doctor, and he becomes the head of like an emergency department. And then he also poses as a pilot. I don't think he ever flies a plane, though. I don't think that's part of what he does. Instead, though, he hops on flights and then flies around on an airline that no longer exists, Pan Am. But in that movie, if you remember, the FBI, and the character is Tom Hanks, who plays the FBI agent, he's tracking Leonardo DiCaprio. And he has him pegged to Miami International Airport. He knows he's going to leave for Miami International Airport. And Leonardo DiCaprio's dad once says to him, why did the Yankees win? And the answer isn't because they have Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and all that. It's because people are busy looking at their pinstripes. In other words, it's all about deception. And that's the only way the Yankees can win, is all about deception. A bunch of cheaters. All right, he takes that kind of advice and he does something that is typical on college campuses at that time, which is he holds a call for stewardesses. And so a room like double this size is filled with very attractive women, and they essentially compete to be chosen to fly around the world. And he picks, I think, like 12. Now what he does is, they know that he's leaving for Miami International Airport. They have the airport staked out. And so what he does is he picks the like 12 prettiest women, he dresses them in flight attendant outfits, he dresses as a pilot, and he walks in the middle of these women right through the FBI. And they're all busy looking at the women and not paying attention to who the pilot is, and he walks right on the plane, boards it, and flies off to Paris with these people. So, again, I don't know how much of that part of the story is real. I do know that that guy exists and he did do all of that stuff, but I don't know like specific how much of that is real. However, back in the 70s, that's what they would compete on. That's part of the services they would compete on. All right, in 1978, disco's raging, and they also deregulate the airline industry. What's going to happen to the price of airline tickets, especially interstate airline tickets? Yeah, deregulation means the price floor goes away. All right, so the price floor is then eliminated, and now airlines are competing on price, right? You guys are all well aware of that. Frontier, Southwest, I've never flown JetBlue, but I know that they do it too. So all these airlines are now competing on price. We have the lowest fares, right? Southwest does a thing where it's the want to get away time. Frontier, their big thing is price. And there are a whole bunch of other what we call discount airlines that compete on price. However, at this point now, the prices have gotten so low that now they kind of are starting to come around to competing on services again. Southwest, what's their big claim?
Bags fly free.
Yeah, you don't pay for checked bags. Okay, one of the perks, I have a Delta Airlines card, and one of the perks to that is that I don't pay for my first checked bag. So they're offering some of these services again, but be well aware that they're always going to compete on price. But the problem with that is like we talked about, now you're in a cramped airline, you have to pay for absolutely everything. When you're on a plane the next time and they ask you for a drink, ask for the can, you'll get a really dirty look. Because they typically don't give you the can of soda along with it. So you can ask for the can, but you have to pay for like anything beyond that, right? You don't get fed and all that kind of stuff. So that is what happened because of the deregulation. Now they're competing on price. There is another place that we see this price floor. They're really, really rare. Like who would artificially jack up the price of a good? And so their price floors are pretty rare to see. But we also see it in the labor market. So this might be something you want to star in your notes because it's probably going to show up on your test in some way, shape, or form. But this is the labor market. So down here, the quantity is quantity of labor. People who work. Workers. Laborers. The demand is the demand for labor, or as we know it, as jobs. And up here is the supply of labor, or workers. And price becomes wages. So again, using basic common sense, as wages increase, right, as wages or price goes up, what happens to the demand for labor? As price goes up, what happens to the demand for labor? Oh, you should have all answered nothing happens because price does not change demand. Oh, it's one of those things again, and yes, that's going to show up on your test. Nothing happens to the demand for labor, but quantity demanded of labor drops, right? As businesses have to pay people more and more money, fewer and fewer jobs are going to become available. The quantity of labor, the quantity of demand of labor decreases. But as wages go up, more and more people are like, that sounds good, I'm going to work, right? And so the supply of labor, workers, increases. Okay, so that all to say that we do see a price floor in the labor market. In other words, remember the definition of a price floor. It's the lowest price, the lowest wage you can pay for something, a worker. That sounds like what? Minimum wage, all right? Minimum wage is a price floor. Whoops. So you have a price floor like that. And $7.25 is the old minimum wage. In Colorado, we voted on an amendment that basically ups the minimum wage to $12 an hour by 2020. As we increase the minimum wage, what happens to the demand for labor, for jobs? It decreases, right? Because this keeps moving up and this line keeps going, right? And so it decreases the demand for jobs. What happens though to the amount of people who want work? It'll increase. And so what are the stipulations? Again, a lot of people ask, so is minimum wage a good thing or a bad thing? The answer back is, it depends on the goal of the society or community or whatever. Okay, it doesn't affect me. I'm a salaried worker, so I work for way less than minimum wage. But if I were like, especially $12 an hour, I work for way less than that. So, but if you're somebody like you guys who are entering in the labor force, you guys want summer jobs, you've probably seen this already. Some of you that have traveled around have probably seen it already, and it's coming to a fast food / Starbucks near you. Okay, you're not going to go into a McDonald's anymore. It's going to, like I said, my predictions in the next few years this happens on a very large scale. You walk into a McDonald's, you don't see a person, you see a computer. And you get to type in what you want to order. Some of you have probably already seen this before. Right? You type in what you want to order, the order goes to a cook, that's the one person that they're going to pay. The cook then makes it, and then maybe they pay another, like a manager / server person, who then walks your order out and hands it to you. That's coming very soon. And it's already, there was a McDonald's in Littleton that did that. I don't know if they still do those kiosks. But they're coming soon. And the idea here is that machine, it doesn't work for minimum wage, it doesn't call in sick, it doesn't quit and find another job. It stays where it is. So after the initial investment, it's really cheap. But I can tell you that most businesses would rather hire people to do that because of the interaction, right? They can troubleshoot, they can be friendly and all that kind of stuff. If you've been to a national or state park and you have to pay for a permit, you don't pay a person anymore, you pay a machine and the machine spits that out. If you've been in a parking garage in downtown Denver, you pay a machine and they validate your ticket. You don't pay a parking attendant anymore. That's all due to consequences of minimum wage. And again, good or bad, that's just simply it. All right, eventually I'm waiting for the robot that's the lifeguard, so I don't have to pay attention to my kids ever again. I just send them into the pool, right? Because the machine will jump in and save you. Because I've seen like people your guys' age lifeguard, and it's this. Up, down, looking around, and like a kid's drowning. One time my wife saw that somebody else had to jump in and do a save, and the lifeguard was like, oh, I was just about to do that. I was like, just about to? You're the lifeguard. Like, that's your job, is to jump in and save. That happened down in the rec center in Castle Rock. So, again, those are consequences of minimum wage. Again, if the society is to up the wage of those low-skilled workers, understand that what you're sacrificing are jobs, because the demand for labor, the jobs will get smaller and smaller. Okay, but for people who keep their jobs, maybe it's a good thing. Okay, so you have to, again, go with the goals of society. Any questions on price floors or anything like that I can answer? Okay, so